Welcome to the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast, the space where research meets the real world. I'm Dionne Stevens, and today we're diving into the world of reality TV with Dr. Denitris Allison, Professor of Communication Studies and Chair of the Africana Studies Department at Stockton University. Reality TV thrives on the interplay of drama and entertainment, drawing in approximately 60% of its viewers primarily for the conflicts and tensions they showcase. This genre's blurring of the lines between reality and scripted entertainment is a billion-dollar industry that's flourished in a large part because of Black women. However, the reliance on negative stereotypes in the portrayals of what is referred to as unscripted or real TV really perpetuates stereotypes and harmful narratives that undermine our multifaceted identities. This is concerning as research has shown 60% of reality TV viewers believe that the shows are at least somewhat real. This week's episode features Dr. Allison, the editor of the book Women's Portrayals on Reality TV, The New Sapphire. This edited volume draws together more than a dozen authors who critique Black women's portrayals across programs like The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Love and Hip Hop, or The Apprentice. Dr. Allison also discusses with us the importance of advocating for more nuanced portrayals of Black women across media genres that reflect the true diversity and richness of Black women's experiences. You know, I'm really excited about the fact that we're looking specifically at Black women in reality TV because there's so much work we already know that does television and movies, music, but it's so interesting when you look at the specific genre of reality TV. Why do you think there's so much interest around this?
Because of the word reality. I think that people think that it's reality. It's not, but we can get into that. But I think it's because of the word reality. It's kind of like, you know, we are a voyeuristic society. Like we're just this idea of having a window into someone's world. We're fascinated by that. And so I think that's where the attention comes from. Right. I touch on a few different things in my book in terms of how this all got started and what fascinated people about things like candid camera or different things where it's like, oh, I can see someone in their real life and in their real element. So that's what I think is the fascination with it, is the idea that it's reality.
Mm-hmm. You went way back, candid camera. So maybe, and certain people will remember that, but maybe you could start off by giving us a little bit of the history of reality that brought us to where we are today.
Yeah. So, again, I touch on it a little bit in the book where, that's one of the earliest examples in the 70s was this idea of candid camera where you kind of play tricks on just regular people on the street and see what their reactions are. And then everybody gets to see that. And it's, pretty funny. So there were things like that in the early days. In the more modern era of reality TV, one of the earliest examples is with The Real World on MTV. That was somewhere around 92 or something like that, where this idea that you put people in a situation, so they're all living together. Like that was irony, I guess, of the situation, because it wasn't really real in terms of how they would be living their lives. But put them in a situation, see what happens, right? That used to be their moniker. Let's see what happens when, strangers get real. So I remember that. And again, I did watch maybe the first 2 or 3 seasons, I think I remember. Maybe through Miami, I guess. But, and so, yeah, it was like, wow, you're seeing them argue and fight and they're getting drunk and they're going out. That was interesting, right? And then you got into like the competition element with Big Brother and Survivor and, kind of like, oh, if you go through these things and you still survive, then you'll win something at the end. I remember my husband and I used to watch the Amazing Race, right? So it was like, oh, that was fascinating. And again, people were in competition to get some. So those are a lot of the earlier shows, and it just continued to evolve. And then, of course, once celebrities got in the mix, then it was really like, oh my God, we can see celebrities in their lives. And, then that really also blew up the medium.
So what do you think is unique about Black women in this medium? What space are they occupying?
Drama. Again, historically, Black women have not had the best portrayals, the most positive portrayals. For me and my research, this is just an extension of that. But again, this idea that it's reality carries even more weight, particularly those who don't have real life experience with Black people, right? You're not necessarily exposed to Black people in real life, but you see this on reality TV and you think, oh, well, that must be how they behave, right? I often tell my students that, when it comes to things like the Real Housewives of Atlanta, right? They've got money, they've got these fabulous clothes, and they go to some event and they end up scrapping on the floor with evening gowns. I explain to my students that I have never seen that in real life. I've been around Black women of all kinds of professions, at all kinds of fantastic functions. I have never seen them scrapping on the ground with evening gowns. Like that shit. The things that are in these shows, I have never seen in real life. So I try to kind of hone in on that with students. But again, it's fascinating when it comes to Black women because it's this idea that we behave in a certain way that is different and in often cases more volatile than other women. I was just before we got on, I was watching The Daily Show, kind of their breakdown of the debate with Kamala Harris. And so at one point he's like, Trump said something and Kamala, the look on her face, she was like, oh, let me take my earrings off like that. That's a stereotype of Black women that we're always ready to scrap. And these reality shows feed into that.
Some people would argue that these Black women choose to be on these shows. I think about the show Married to Medicine with Dr. Jackie, who's a real doctor, very successful. And she actually said, we're not trying to give you a fake story. We're giving you who we are. So you have Black women presenting themselves in these ways. How do you argue that the women themselves are not choosing to be these, and this is not their public personas?
With every stereotype, there's an element of truth, right? So are there women who behave in the ways that you see on television? Absolutely. But also, are there women who are just capitalizing off of the financial value of reality TV? Absolutely. So some of them are kind of putting it on more than maybe they would be or do in their normal lives to make it interesting. There are those who have been on reality shows who didn't necessarily last for very long. Why? Because they didn't do enough drama. They weren't big enough in their personas. So, we don't want that on the show because we want it to be interesting. So some of these women are absolutely adding on or exaggerating perhaps who they really are. I remember when Omarosa was on The Apprentice. Now, I went to graduate school with Omarosa at Howard University. So I had personal interactions with her. And we were all blown away when we saw that she was on the show. We were just like, oh my God. And in a lot of ways, we were in the School of Communication. So we were just like, this is counter to everything we've been talking about. But she, at one point after the show, she kind of talked about, oh, well, they painted me as a villain through editing. And I believe that's a part of the process. How you edit a particular person in a way that paints them as a villain. That's a part of the reality TV process. So yes, is there an element of truth to what she said? Yes. But did she also kind of add on in order to make her such a popular and talked about character? Absolutely. Because we were all talking about her. And then that got her additional opportunities. And then she was on this show and she was on The Apprentice again. And so some of these women who are absolutely volunteering to be a part of this are finding ways to kind of capitalize on the popularity. So that's how I think about it in terms of, for those who argue, well, that they're making a choice or it's real and that's how they're portraying themselves. There's editing, there's all kinds of elements to this, and that the women are also adding on and piling on.
Absolutely. And in fact, I know I read part of your book. One of the arguments, though, too, is that how it's edited and even what Black women are allowed to, how they're expected to present themselves really falls into historical stereotypes. So you don't usually see Black women playing the sweet, innocent role in these shows because it doesn't fit into that. Can you sort of explain how this sort of fits into the larger historical narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you have had Black women who have, taken roles early on that even in scripted shows, they were edited in a particular way and characterized in a particular way. The mammies of old, they never really had their own families because it wanted to add to that element that, all they live for is to serve the white families. Like they love them more than anybody in their lives, right? Even with the shows that early on didn't ever portray Black women with a partner, right? No husband. So you look at Julia, her husband passed away. Like she had to be portrayed as a single mom in order for people to believe that narrative. And then there was a huge fallout with Good Times, which was the first nuclear Black family on television. And then when they decided we're going to kill the father character off the show, the actors themselves even tried to fight against that. Like, no, because now it's just going to be another single Black mom. So these shows are being written and edited in a way to fit stereotypical beliefs about Black women. Sapphire, back on Amos and Andy, like she had to be this nagging and constantly negative Black woman because that was the belief about Black women. And so there have been decades of efforts to make sure that Black women weren't really portrayed in positive ways. And again, I think reality television just adds to that. Now, I do think there's a lot of scripted TV that has come along to try to change that narrative over recent years. But I think reality TV is mostly continuing with the formula that people like the Jerry Springer formula. Like people like the drama and the foolishness. And so that just adds to it.
What I really liked about your book is that you pulled together so many diverse researchers looking at different reality shows and really doing a deep dive into the critical analysis of the shows that each of the authors chose to write about. Can you tell me why you decided to do this sort of research lens on this popular culture phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, mainly my goal and the rest of the authors who contributed, we initially started with a panel that we had at the National Communication Association conference. And we were like, we should make this into a book because we were talking about the ways in which what is portrayed on television can actually impact Black women in their real lives. Like it adds to the way people interact with us, the way we're treated, right? So I had told this one story, and I often tell it to my students as well, that my very first teaching job at a predominantly white institution in Virginia in the 90s, Confederate flags everywhere. I was the only Black teacher in the communication department. And 3 weeks into the job, the department secretary said to me, "I'm so glad you don't have an attitude like I thought you were going to have." Yes. Every time I tell my students in class that, they're like, "No." So, and then of course, in that moment, I have a choice to make. So now it's like, do I react in the way that she may be expecting a Black woman, start rolling the neck and, am I going to go off on her? Or am I going to try to counter that stereotype and that narrative? And so we were talking about that. And then it kind of got us into reality TV. This idea that it's reality feeds further this narrative because people think, well, that's reality. Like it's one thing to talk about, Julia and Amos and Andy and, all the shows of old. But it's another thing, again, for some people to talk about reality TV because that's more real, right? That it's reality TV. They're just following people around in their daily lives. That's what made us think, we really should do a deep dive into this and think about how is this impacting viewers in terms of perception of Black women. And so, we focused on the content analysis piece of it in our research. But for us, the larger question is always, how does this play out in our real lives? I mean, you saw all the, when Michelle Obama was first lady, all of these assumptions made about her. She's going off on people in the White House, on the staff. People believe these things and then they interact with us in a particular way, expecting what they see on television to be who we are.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the diversity in chapters. So you have Preachers of LA. You talk about Tyra Banks, and of course, Love and Hip Hop. Maybe you can talk about some of the things that you found interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there was this question of, are there some of these shows that are better or more positive than others, right? So that's how, we kind of got into the idea of, the pastors' wives and like Preachers of LA. Like, is that a positive portrayal? Is that more? So that's what we were kind of looking at and analyzing. And each author kind of chose what they wanted to focus on, Black motherhood. Like, how is that portrayed in reality television? Several of us, on this team were mothers or are mothers. And so we wanted to take a look at how is that portrayed? How are professional women portrayed? Like, and then looking at the shows that were really, really popular, like Tyra Banks, that show was really popular for a time. And so we wanted to kind of take a look from as much diversity as possible to determine, like, is this happening in all the shows, or are there some that are more positive than others? Are there some shows that are more positive than others? And so that's what we were kind of doing, even like with a competition show like The Apprentice, which at the time, I guess it had been out for maybe 10 or 12 years by that time, but it was still going on. And so, we wanted to kind of take a look at that from that lens. So the shows where women are living together in a house, the shows where it's a competition show, the shows where it's a Christian perspective, from the perspective of mothers. So we wanted to be as diverse as possible.
I appreciate the diverse topic coverage in each chapter. How do you think your book can contribute to understandings of reality TV for Black women and others?
I hope that it kind of demonstrates that it's not necessarily the only perspective about Black women, right? I want people to understand the historical context, that this is nothing new, that the portrayals of Black women have, really started out negative in terms of early film and television. And then this is just another element of it, right? I also want readers to understand that they should think about the word reality very loosely, but also understand that even while there may be some truth into what's portrayed on these shows, you do have to understand that there is, Black women are not a monolith. And so don't assume that, I saw them act this way on reality TV, so all of them must act this way, right? I've done several different talks about the book over the years. I mean, right now we're like 8 years out since I first published the book.
Yeah.
And I've done several talks on it. And I always get the question, somebody will inevitably say, well, isn't everyone on reality television portrayed badly? And yeah, in a lot of ways, that's absolutely true, right? It's made for drama and foolishness and all that. Again, I harken back to shows like Maury Povich, those kind of shows where it's always this wild and crazy and it's fighting and all that. But these kinds of messages about Black women, what's unique about that is Black women and men, in a lot of ways, Black men are often put in this box together, right? So, no matter how many white women on The Real Housewives throw drinks in each other's faces, it's not assumed that when your white female professor comes in the room, that she's going to be like that, right? But oftentimes students do assume certain things about me. I've had other faculty talk about, I was gonna knock on your door. One said this to me. I was gonna knock on your door yesterday, but I was just nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why? What do you think I'm going to do to you I didn't want to disturb you. I was nervous. Like, there are literally people on my campus who say, oh, she's scary, or I have this reputation. They have never seen me be anybody's behind on campus, right? But again, these ideas tend to follow us in a way that they don't follow everyone who is portrayed badly on reality television.
I hear you, and I think that's such a great explanation. As a Black woman and a researcher, what do you think the future is for Black women in reality TV?
Look, here's the thing. I've been really speaking out against reality TV for years, right? But at the end of the day, these portrayals are not going to stop because the ratings are good, right? People are watching. There is now an entire network, Zeus Network, dedicated to predominantly Black and brown people, mostly women, acting a fool, right? And people are eating it up. It's a subscription network. People are subscribing, they're watching. Again, it's not going to stop as long as people continue to consume. I have been a kind of a protest of one for decades now, and nobody cares. Like, it doesn't matter that I really don't watch any of this stuff beyond if I'm not researching it. And again, but the ratings are good and these things are popular and people are going to watch. And so the future of it is it's going to continue until people get tired of it, until people say, you know what, this is not good. Like, this is just not a good look. I say that all the time, but even people who know that, like, this is probably not a good look for us, but that's, when I come home from a long day and I just want to watch something mindless, that's what they watch. And so it contributes to the ratings, and then people continue to make more. It's also cheaper than making scripted television. So producers understand how lucrative it can be when you're paying, the on-air talent less than you would have to pay a Kerry Washington or, a Viola Davis or someone like that. So, again, it's not going anywhere anytime soon, I doubt. And it's just getting, crazier and crazier. Before we got on here, I just, kind of went to scan some of the shows on Zeus, which I do not watch. But just looking at trailers, it's like, this is wild. Like, this is nuts.
I think you brought up a good point. It's not going away easily. So how could people who are watching it, from your perspective, sort of look at it critically and start thinking about it critically?
I mean, look, it's first of all, just understand that it's not reality. Like, that's the biggest thing for me, that, there have been people who have done interviews and talked about, like, this is what we were told to do, or the producer came in and suggested this, or we had to, like, they wanted to reshoot this. I mean, it's just that's not how people function in their day-to-day lives, where, oh, I say something to my husband and then it's like, oh, let's run that back. Let's do that over again. Like, come on. It's just understand it for what it is, because again, it's not going away, but understand that this is not a realistic portrayal of all Black women, right? It's probably not even a fraction of Black women. It might be some. Like I said, there's truth to everything. So yeah, there are some who, might pop you upside the head just as soon look at you. That might be true. But certainly don't think that every Black woman you come across is capable of that. Right. So that's the thing that we have to understand, the three dimensions of Black women. Like, we're not just this one thing and in this one way. And I appreciate, like I said, I do think that there are other producers out there who are really working to give us some diversity in portrayals of Black women on scripted shows. And, that I'm really happy about, because it's showing, there are villains, there are, positive characters, like, there can be all of these things. So don't assume that Black women are just like what you saw on Baddies last night. That's just this is not the thing. So just understanding that it's not reality. That's just not what it is. It's entertainment. That's what it is.
That was Dr. Denitris Allison, editor of the book, Black Women's Portrayals on Reality Television, The New Sapphire. To find out more about Dr. Allison, including accessing her book, social media handles, and other articles, just visit this episode's page on our website. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast. We have some great guests lined up, so be sure to check out our episode guide by visiting our website, www.psychologyofblackwomanhood.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. To stay up to date on our upcoming episodes and get all the updates about our related activities, you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks for joining us.